Says, you said a month ago that world peace would be proclaimed in hours to days. Can you tell us more about that?
It's been settled. This is very interesting. Even you see separate things happening in different ways. The basis, fundamental world peace basis has been settled. So much so that the Chinese have taken lead on this, and economical power of them is dictating it. The hot spots of the war past 100 years has been Middle East and a strong influence of the Americans. We saw the same thing in Africa for a long time with between the communists and the rest. And this situation has been settled two ways. The basis for the world peace is now fully grounded by the Chinese. It's the beauty of the leadership presidency of China. They pushed they stood on the sideline. They didn't take side, but they pushed the mighty power of purchasing power to influence those who were purchasing from them. That you want us to purchase, this is a new way. Find a solution. American pushed war between the neighbor country of Saudi to bring Iran into war as supporting that country. And it was very lucrative for the Americans and the Israelis. They sold everything to it. And the Saudis lined it with gold, black gold. And Chinese came in, said the stability comes when we have a continuous supply and there is a peace in Middle East and Persian Gulf, in that part of the world. The wisdom of military did not work. The wisdom of finance and collaboration worked. So much so that this week Iran, after 7-8 years, has opened its embassy and consul in Saudi Arabia. We see the same thing, United Arab Emirates cancelling a number of military agreements with Americans in favor of collaboration, bigger expansion with China. We're seeing a massive injection of 400 billion by the Chinese into gas lines of Iran. And they want to make sure these gas lines have never been damaged or there is nothing. So they needed this peace, economical peace with Saudis. We see the same pattern in Africa. And next month's meeting of the BRICS with 20 new nations on the board, lining up to join, devaluing the dollar. And this now has pushed the Americans to change direction. More, maybe short term, trying to get nations back, but long term, knowing they lost the ground to the Chinese. President Xi uses this for a very prudent way of doing it because they push with their massive construction companies that we give this, but we do this. China might lose long term, but short term will guarantee the long term success. And we will see the same very soon in the next few months in Ukraine. Vatican will pay heavily for their interference in Ukraine. And we've seen it even in the past 2 or 3 days by breaking up the dam in Ukraine, either way, accidentally or deliberately, a huge plan by the Western allies to push the war into the line of the Russia and maybe beginning of another war. A huge number of soldiers and hardware have been washed down the Rhine. They don't tell us in the West, but military reports, official reports in military shows hundreds and thousands of vehicles have washed down the line. So all the promises of getting back now has become a bigger danger with other things. But China will be the beneficiary of this dam. They will rebuild this dam. No government has the financial backing and the material backing of China to build this dam. Billions of dollars. But with what we see sitting in the side of the Keshe Foundation with the support, agricultural support and new technologies, Ukraine and grain bread baskets will soon be replaced by China. By 2730, China will become an exporter of grain, replacing Ukraine. This is the biggest mistake Vatican made in encouraging this war. And the Americans will pay for it more heavier because the Chinese grain will not be by, what do you call it, modified. And Keshe Foundation will have a huge hand in this development. By 2027, 30s, China will become one of the major natural, normal, beautiful, non-GMO seeds, which again pushes the Americans back, and all these so many deaths we see in the farmers in Africa and Asia, which they cannot, every year they have to buy the seed. So in general, we'll see a massive change or shift, but it has to be fundamental. It cannot be by top. We know clearly situations like Taiwan will be resolved by Chinese in a very amicable way because the Americans trying to use it as a hotspot. But we'll see Taiwan to become part of the mainland China in the next 5 to 7 years. Chinese don't war. They don't go to war to create, war to get. They use wisdom. And it's the wise way to do it. And the only beneficiary we'll see, it's a long term, is Chinese. And they use that for peace. And the seed for the world peace has been set by the Chinese leadership. And you will see it. They tell me I support Chinese a lot with this and that, but we sit there with reality. We sit, we watch, we've been part of the structure. And we see how the changes are coming in. What comes in the Western newspapers is a bunch of lies, which has only lie readers. That's the only way they can keep their, what I call colonial time alive. But in fact, there's no colony left. As a Chinese ambassador told me once in Brussels in 2010-11, he said, now colonization comes with science. If we get hold of scientists like you, you're an oil well, we become rich. No more lands can replace the new technology and sciences that scientists like you bring. And that oil well has landed in China. And we see the whole angles of the development. And it's not based on military might, it's based on fairness and what we call development of the peace. So you make more money out of peace than the few factories making guns. The only people who make money, especially in the West, is the church and the gun manufacturers. They kill, and the rest of the family pays in every weekly prayer to the church. And this is what has to come to an end, and it has come to an end. So it started, it's backed. Science and technology is backed by the most powerful nation in the world. And US citizens realize and see it gradually in the coming time. Any other question?
Will Turkey have a new position regarding peace? Was his question.
This is a very delicate position Turkey has taken. One of the reasons for Erdogan winning the election last week, 2 months before the election, he was very far behind. And he needed certain support to get to be re-elected. And the major person in creating that support is one of our close knowledge seekers, very good friend of mine. And we are very much aware and in touch with the situation in Turkey through his operation. He's one of the devoted knowledge seekers for years. He's a very high-ranking diplomat. And we meet quite frequently with him. He's a family friend, become a family friend. And it's, he told me he's going to change it, and he puts his life on it, that he'll get elected, and he managed to do it. We see very important role for Turkey to play for Erdogan. But you have to realize he suffers from a very severe cancer. The biggest problem for Turkey is not while he's in power. Would he be able to hold on for another 5 years? Or maybe 10 years? And the geopolitics of Turkey will touch the operation of China in Middle East. And this is very, very delicate position, how much Americans will try to entice him. And what we've seen, the bilateral and combination of meetings between Iran, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, in resolving the situation is very important, because he had to relent to Chinese. You have to understand the political situation Erdogan is in. And China again played a massive role in these discussions, and what we'll see as a peace in this part of the world. The earthquake was part of it. Turkey does not have the financial backing to reconstruct this massive earthquake. And guarantees through Chinese construction companies will bring him relief. And it'll be paid in a way we know how. It's been set to be paid in a very, physical way. And Erdogan, to get that to re-elect and to be there, had to relent to peace applications and pressures of China with what we call quadruple nations. And in the background, he had to kick the Americans and turn back on the Israelis. But this time he cannot jump just to get re-elected. Chinese will hold him to this. And now we see a lot of Erdogan talks, but the position of power has changed in his operation. And Chinese have a lot of say in the process of changes politically in Turkey. And we'll see in the end of interference of Americans in that part of the world. When you look at these things and when you speak about the person, you have to understand the whole culture he set up. As we say in English, Chinese have got him back short and careless. And he will stick to it. He will not budge. And we'll see the peace process in Syria will complete in a favorable manner for everyone. The biggest problem has been to resolve the situation in northern borders of Iran on the what we call Russian satellite countries, which now they think they have a power and they got in bed with Israelis, but the tail has been cut. Again, with this agreement too. So Erdogan has a lot of freedom, but he cannot. Domestically, he is very powerful, but internationally, to stay in power, he had to give a lot out to the Chinese. And to get it, he had to say goodbye to a lot of Americans' agreements. And you see more and more of it. We'll see a peaceful, what we call West Asia, East European zone in the next 3 to 5 years.